Welcome in, everyone. Pull up a chair, get comfortable, and consider yourself the third person at our table today.
Yeah, we are absolutely thrilled you're joining us for this deep dive.
We really are. And we have got a massive stack of materials in front of us today. It's this really rich, multifaceted mix of historical police records, architectural museum notes, and centuries of cultural analysis.
All centered around a single globally recognized subject, the Mona Lisa.
Right. But our mission today isn't to just sit here and analyze color palettes or, brushstrokes. Our goal is to look right past the paint and the canvas.
Exactly. We want to understand how a 500-year-old portrait actually survived outright theft, acid attacks, and environmental protests.
To become not just the most famous painting in the world, but the most heavily fortified one, too.
It is a fascinating trajectory to map out because when you look at the painting today, you are looking at an undeniable icon.
Oh, absolutely.
But that status, that global reverence, didn't just manifest organically because it was a masterful piece of art. The journey from a relatively standard 16th century portrait to an absolute cultural juggernaut is paved with human error, obsession, and some genuinely baffling infrastructural failures.
It's a story of how context and chaos completely transform the way we experience a piece of history. Okay, let's unpack this. Because the painting wasn't always a global phenomenon.
Far from it.
Its modern fame was actually supercharged by a massive, highly public security failure. But before we get to the heist that changed everything, we really have to set the stage with the creator himself, Leonardo da Vinci.
We do. And the historical notes we are reviewing highlight something essential about his methodology. He wasn't just a painter.
Right. He was the quintessential universal genius operating around the year 1500. We're talking about an artist, a scientist, and an inventor, all occupying the same mind.
And the breadth of his analytical thinking is what makes the art so enduring. I mean, we often compartmentalize disciplines today, right? You are either in engineering or you are in the fine arts.
You pick a lane.
Exactly. But Da Vinci completely ignored those boundaries. The archival notes point out that he was actively drafting structural blueprints for a helicopter and aerial screw-over 500 years ago.
That is just wild to think about.
It is. He was studying aerodynamics, anatomy, and physics, and then applying that exact same rigorous mathematical observation to the way light hits the human face.
It is one thing to know Da Vinci was an inventor, but looking at these specific blueprints for rotary flight from the 1500s, you realize how heavily his scientific mind must have influenced his art.
It's all connected for him.
Imagine the kind of brain that conceptualizes vertical flight centuries before the internal combustion engine is even a thought, and then turns that hyper-focused attention toward a single portrait. It really puts the creation of the Mona Lisa into perspective.
That intense focus is precisely why the timeline of this painting is so staggering. When a mind wired for that level of detail commits to a canvas, the dedication is immense.
Yeah, the art history timelines indicate that Da Vinci worked on the Mona Lisa from roughly 1503 to 1519.
That is approximately 16 years.
16 years.
16 years dedicated to layering microscopic glazes of paint on this one single piece of wood. It was not a quick commission to pay the bills. It was a decades-long obsession with perfecting the optical illusion of human life.
16 years on a single piece of poplar wood. I mean, think about where you were 16 years ago, and imagine refining the exact same project every single day since then.
It's almost incomprehensible.
It really is. But what I find so compelling is the subject of all this groundbreaking effort. You hear the title Mona Lisa, and it sounds so grand, almost mystical.
Right, but the cultural records clarify exactly who she was, and it completely shifts the entire narrative.
It does.
That is a crucial point of context. It is widely accepted that the subject of the portrait is Lisa Gherardini, the wife of a silk merchant from Florence.
Just a merchant's wife.
Yes. And the title itself, Mona Lisa, actually demystifies her status quite a bit when you look at the translation. In Italian, Mona is simply a polite contraction for madam or lady.
So essentially the translation is Madame Lisa, the most famous, heavily guarded, culturally analyzed painting on the face of the earth is titled Madame Lisa.
That's it.
It's like if the greatest masterpiece on the planet was called Mrs. Smith or Mrs. Tanaka. We are so used to Renaissance art focusing on deities, popes, or monarchs.
Which makes it so interesting.
Right. Here, this decades-long application of unmatched genius is directed at a rising merchant-class citizen.
Which was quietly revolutionary in its own right. It represents a subtle shift in the socio-economic landscape of Renaissance Florence, moving away from purely royal or religious subjects and elevating the merchant class.
She was just a standard citizen.
Yet, through Da Vinci's 16-year application of genius and the wild historical events that followed, Madame Lisa became immortalized.
And that brings us to the tipping point of that immortality. Because for centuries, she was highly regarded by art historians, but she was definitely not the pop culture phenomenon she is today.
No, not at all. That transformation required a catalyst.
Yes. So let's fast forward to August 21st, 1911. Picture the scene. It is a Tuesday morning in Paris.
The museum maintenance staff arrive for work at the Louvre.
They walk through the Salon Carré, and they notice a glaring empty space on the wall. The Mona Lisa is simply gone.
And what the police reports from that morning reveal is a remarkably mundane initial reaction.
Yeah, they didn't lock down the building. They just assumed the painting had been moved by the museum's photography department for a scheduled shoot.
That assumption actually points to a broader infrastructural issue at the Louvre during that era. The communication between departments was practically non-existent. When something monumental went missing, the staff's brain naturally rationalized it with the most bureaucratic explanation possible. It took them an entire day to verify with the photographers and finally realize that a priceless Renaissance artifact had genuinely vanished.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because you naturally assume a heist of this magnitude,
Yeah.
stealing a Da Vinci from the Louvre, must have involved a highly coordinated syndicate.
Grappling hooks, alarm.
Exactly, an elaborate cinematic escape plan. But the thief was a single man named Vincenzo Peruggia, and he was not an international art smuggler.
Far from it. Peruggia was an Italian immigrant and a working-class craftsman. And the critical detail here is that he had been contracted to do interior work right there at the Louvre.
He was an inside man.
He was, specifically tasked with cutting and fitting the protective glass boxes that housed the museum's most valuable paintings. He knew the layout of the galleries, he knew the patrol routes of the guards, and most importantly, he intimately knew the glaring weaknesses of the building.
The method he used exposes just how fragile the preservation of history was at the time. The architectural surveys of the Louvre from 1911 show a massive, sprawling palace with 45 acres of floor space,
45 acres.
guarded by a shockingly small security force. Peruggia didn't have to break in. He literally just walked in on a Sunday, hid inside a supply closet overnight, and waited for the museum to close.
The simplicity of the execution is staggering. He emerged from the closet on Monday morning when the museum was closed to the public. He walked up to the painting, removed the glass case, the very case he had helped construct, slipped the painted wood panel under his workman's smock, and walked out a side door into the Parisian morning.
He just tucked a 400-year-old masterpiece under his shirt and took the train home.
It is absurd.
It completely backfired on the Louvre at the time, but for the painting itself, it was the greatest unintended PR campaign in history.
Oh, absolutely. The theft skyrocketed the Mona Lisa's fame. The archival newspaper clippings describe how it became this phantom masterpiece.
Its image was suddenly splashed across the front pages of publications worldwide.
Right. Before 1911, you knew what it looked like if you studied art. After 1911, every single person on the street knew Madame Lisa's face.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this specific, highly publicized, deeply embarrassing heist is the fundamental catalyst for the modern museum experience.
Without a doubt. The strict, sophisticated security systems, the climate-controlled vaults, the electronic surveillance protocols we take for granted in museums today, they were forced into existence by this massive failure.
The global art community had a brutal wake-up call regarding the vulnerability of their cultural heritage.
And the global media coverage created this fascinating psychological phenomenon. The historical accounts note an absolutely surreal detail. People actually queued up in droves, forming massive hours-long lines at the Louvre just to go in and stare at the empty wall where the Mona Lisa used to hang.
It is such a strange aspect of human nature. I mean, why are we as a society so intensely drawn to the absence of a thing?
The empty wall became an exhibition of its own. It symbolized a shared cultural loss, a massive unsolved mystery, and the sheer audacity of the crime.
People weren't queuing up to experience art.
No, they were queuing up to participate in a global cultural moment. They wanted to stand at the epicenter of the drama.
It just shows how much human beings love a spectacle. And while millions of people were staring at that blank space in Paris, imagining international espionage and secret billionaire buyers, the logistical reality of where the painting actually was is almost absurd.
He was missing for 2 entire years.
2 years of massive international police investigations, and for that entire duration, Perugia was just living with it,
Hidden in a false-bottom trunk under a stove.
in his tiny one-room apartment in Paris.
The contrast is unbelievable. You have the most sought-after object on the planet generating global panic sitting in a cramped boarding house in the very same city it was stolen from.
Just a few miles away.
The physical reality of storing a delicate 400-year-old piece of painted poplar wood in a poorly ventilated Parisian apartment for 2 years is a conservationist's nightmare.
It's a miracle it survived. He finally slipped up in 1913, though. He traveled down to Florence, Italy, and attempted to sell the painting to a local art dealer.
And the dealer immediately recognized it, authenticated it, and alerted the authorities. The gig was up.
But when you look at the interrogation transcripts,
Mm-hmm.
the motive he gives adds a whole new layer of complexity to the narrative.
It's worth noting that the interrogation records reveal a much more complex motive than simple financial gain. Perugia adamantly claimed his primary motivation was patriotism.
He argued that the Mona Lisa was a sovereign Italian treasure painted by the ultimate Italian genius, and that it had been historically looted by France.
He believed he was executing a righteous repatriation of a stolen artifact.
He genuinely believed he was righting a historical wrong, and the cultural records show that his defense wasn't entirely dismissed by the public.
Not at all. That patriotic sentiment actually earned him a degree of hero status among certain early 20th century Italian nationalist groups.
It perfectly illustrates how multiple perspectives can entirely shift a historical narrative. If you are a French official or a museum curator, he is a brazen thief who endangered world heritage.
But viewed through the lens of Italian nationalism at the time, he is a patriot bringing a masterpiece back to its rightful soil. It forces us to look at how national identity complicates the ownership of art.
Regardless of his motives, the painting was recovered and eventually returned to the Louvre. And you would logically think, okay, the turbulent chapter of her life is over. She's back on the wall, the security is heightened, she is safe.
But being the most famous painting in the world inherently makes you a massive target.
Fame has a very dark, very volatile side, and Madame Lisa became a magnet for chaos. The list of physical attacks this specific piece of wood and paint has endured is relentless.
The timeline of vandalism is extensive. The institutional records document several severe incidents that physically threaten the artwork.
Just nonstop over the years.
In 1956 alone, there were 2 major attacks. In one instance, a vandal threw a rock directly at the painting, shattering the glass and actually chipping a speck of pigment off the Mona Lisa's left elbow.
Someone hurled a rock at a masterpiece that Da Vinci spent 16 years of his life painting.
And later that exact same year, someone threw concentrated hydrochloric acid at it.
And the threats have continued right into the modern era. The contemporary sources note that most recently, in 2023, environmental activists breached the barrier and splashed soup all over the artwork's protective casing.
Now, to be clear, the source material documents these events objectively. We are simply reporting on the historical environment this painting exists in, not endorsing the methods or taking sides on the ideologies of those who attempt to vandalize it.
Right, absolutely. We are just looking at the facts. It is a constant barrage of stones, acid, and soup. It feels like every few decades, someone decides they need to physically confront this specific painting.
What's fascinating here is analyzing the underlying motives behind these attacks. When we synthesize the historical and contemporary reports, the drivers vary wildly.
How so?
Well, you have calculated political actions, where individuals or groups leverage the painting's massive global profile to draw immediate media attention to their specific cause.
The painting is essentially held hostage for awareness.
Exactly. But you also see actions that seem to stem from sheer rebellion against the concept of its immense fame.
Like people who are frustrated that this one specific image takes up so much cultural oxygen to the point where it overshadows everything else in the room.
Precisely. In those instances, it becomes an attack on the institution of elite art and mainstream consensus itself.
That makes sense.
The Mona Lisa is no longer just a Renaissance portrait. It is a symbol of untouchable institutional power. Attacking it is a way to violently strike at all of those concepts simultaneously. It becomes a helpless billboard for societal grievances.
Right. The painting is just caught in the crossfire of human drama. But the Louvre obviously could just sit back and allow people to continually throw things at a priceless artifact.
I had to adapt.
To survive all of this, the Mona Lisa has essentially been engineered into a fortress. The architectural notes detail her current state, and she now lives inside a custom-built, heavily monitored, bulletproof glass case.
The engineering behind her current display is a technological marvel designed to combat both time and human unpredictability.
Because the painting is on a panel of poplar wood, not canvas, right?
Yes, which makes it incredibly vulnerable to warping. If the humidity fluctuates, the wood expands or contracts, which would cause Da Vinci's 500-year-old paint to flake off.
That would be disastrous.
The case meticulously controls the internal temperature and hygrometric levels to prevent that.
But the primary function of that case is physical defense. It is an impenetrable barrier built for a single piece of wood.
And the design is incredibly effective.
That is exactly why the 2023 soup attack, while visually jarring and engineered for maximum media impact, did absolutely zero damage to the actual painting. The liquid just hit the non-reflective bulletproof glass and slid down to the floor.
It functioned exactly as intended.
So what does this all mean? When we look back at everything we've pulled from the sources today, the irony of the Mona Lisa's 500-year journey is nothing short of astounding.
It really is an incredible story.
Think about the complete narrative. She started as a portrait of a simple merchant's wife in Florence. She was painted over 16 painstaking years by a universal genius who was simultaneously drafting blueprints for helicopters.
Right.
But her eternal, untouchable fame wasn't cemented purely by Da Vinci's brilliant application of sfumato. It was cemented by a disgruntled handyman who walked out of the Louvre with her under his smock, hiding her in a Parisian boarding house for 2 years.
And the ultimate reward for surviving the theft, the rock, the acid, and the soup. A life sentence behind military-grade bulletproof glass. It is a remarkable synthesis of her history. The major takeaway for you listening right now is that the way we experience art in the modern world is rarely just an unadulterated interaction with the artist's original intent.
So true.
Our perception is heavily shaped by human folly, by historical crime, by shifting political narratives, and by our collective, almost inexplicable obsession with notoriety.
The Mona Lisa is a masterpiece of the Renaissance, undoubtedly. But she has also become a mirror, reflecting 500 years of chaotic human behavior right back at us.
She is a mirror.
And that leaves us with a final, brand new thought for you to ponder long after we wrap up this deep dive. Given everything we've discussed about her physical vulnerability and the fortress she requires, if the original poplar wood were to eventually warp and rot away, or if a vandal actually succeeded in destroying the panel tomorrow, would the Louvre simply hang a flawless, high-resolution replica behind that bulletproof glass?
That's a fascinating thought.
And if they did, would millions of people still queue up for hours just to take a photo of it? Has the Mona Lisa transcended being a physical painting to become a pure concept, one that doesn't even require Da Vinci's original paint to survive?
This raises an important question about the nature of authenticity itself. Are we drawn to the hand of the artist, or are we simply drawn to the myth we've built around it?
When you look at the Mona Lisa today, are you really admiring Leonardo da Vinci's artistic genius, or are you just staring at the echoes of a 1911 crime scene?
Exactly.
If Vincenzo Peruggia hadn't walked out of the Louvre with it under his arm, would the Mona Lisa just be another forgotten portrait in a crowded hallway, totally ignored by the world?
It is something to chew on the next time you see her image.
It really is. Thank you all so much for pulling up a chair and joining us on this deep dive. We always love unpacking these historical layers with you, and we invite you to return for our next exploration.
Until then, keep questioning what you see.